And what we wanted to do today is kind of talk with you guys a little bit about veterans entrepreneurship and the space, maybe share some stories. We've got some incredible panelists here. So what I thought we might do is we'll give brief introductions, each of us, and then we'll have a conversation for a little while and take whatever questions. But I think with a small group like this, if there are any questions along the way, we were thinking of doing like formal, like 45 minutes, Ellie throws something at me and then we go to questions. So just interrupt us, with a group like this, and we'll just keep this relaxed, get a good conversation going. So my name is John Anderson. I graduated from Columbia Business School in 2013. I actually came into the Army before 9/11. I came in as an interrogator and a Chinese linguist, and then switched over to the officer side and stayed in the intel world my whole career. I got out after my last deployment, transitioned to business school, and then went into finance for a few years, and I'm actually back into the military now. So I work at the Pentagon on a project to bring artificial intelligence and machine learning to DoD broadly. So happy to answer any questions about that, or really anything else. Katie?
That's kind of a tough act to follow. Hi, I'm Katie Horgan. I'm a Marine Corps vet. I served from 2006 to 2012. And I came here to business school and I graduated in 2014. Since school, I've been working at startups, early stage companies. I worked at a company called Plated, if anyone's familiar, in the meal kit space, and a couple of other small companies. And I left last year to start my own consulting firm, and I work with early stage companies, mainly in the food and beverage space, but anyone with a physical product that need operations, logistics, and supply chain help. So I have my own consulting practice. And I also last year started a community that's called the Veteran-Owned Collective. So that's a platform and a community for veterans who are also business owners. And the mission is to support and empower veteran business owners. Happy to be here.
I'm Taylor Justice. I was a U.S. Army veteran, graduated 14 from Columbia Business School as well. And I'm the co-founder and president of Unite Us. And Unite Us is a technology platform that is specifically addressing the social determinants of health. We're in the healthcare space, but we started off within the veteran military community, helping people transition from active duty into the quote-unquote civilian sector, and then quickly realized that the challenges that the veteran and military community face are not unique. They just happen to be the perfect petri dish of American society when you look at age, race, socioeconomic status. And in 2015-16, social determinants of health started to become a pretty big buzz term within healthcare. So really what we do is we built a platform that helps organizations that provide housing, employment, food, transportation, legal, connect with each other in a coordinated platform, and they can meaningfully exchange data with healthcare, with government, so that we're looking at people holistically rather than just looking at them clinically.
Hi, good morning. My name is Mark Rockefeller. Like many of you, my goal is to do good and do well. I served 9 years in the Air Force and felt like I was doing good but not so well in terms of pay. Came here to Columbia for law school, worked at a Wall Street law firm for a couple of years. I was doing well but no good, and got sick of that, and so did that for 2 years, left and co-founded a startup in my basement. That was 5 years ago. Since then, that startup has funded about $200 million into primarily veteran-owned companies. So we're the largest funder of veteran-owned companies in the country. And then we have a foundation also that does a bunch of pitch contests and grant awards and speed coaching and that kind of thing for veterans as well. So this is really my passion. It is to turn as many veterans as possible into entrepreneurs. It's good for veterans, it's good for the community, it's good for all of us. And so I'm thrilled to be here.
All right, so that's a pretty decent panel right there. No questions off limits, and again, interrupt us if you have one. Just real quick, just want to give a shout out to Ellie Dorsey and Gwen Schufro for inviting us all here. Thank you so much. We love to be here. As we talked as panelists getting ready for this, one of the things we talked about is this civil-military dialogue. I love talking about my service. I feel like it was an honor and a privilege to serve. I just want to thank everybody here for allowing me to do that. But we love talking about this, so again, no questions off limits. But I thought maybe to kick this off, as I was sitting down and having coffee with Taylor this morning, he was talking about, there's a million reasons to say no. And we're going to trademark that because I think it's super good. There's a million reasons to say no for a veteran to go into their own business, to start their own venture. But Taylor, I thought maybe you'd start off and just kind of share your story about how you got into it.
Yeah, so Unite Us was founded based off of personal pain points. So I was a U.S. Army infantry officer, unfortunately was medically discharged. My experience of dealing with the VA, finding a new job, finding a place to live, just lived the inefficiencies of that process, but didn't struggle. Found a job relatively easy, but I was always worried about those folks that were in my platoon or in my company that might have came straight out of high school or didn't have a strong support network to go back to. But at that moment in my life, I was just kind of in survival mode. And ended up moving to Philadelphia because that's where I found a job. Got involved in the very early days of a nonprofit in the veteran space called Team Red, White, and Blue. Founded the Philadelphia chapter of that, which is really focused on physical fitness and social activities. And chapter grew from like 5 people to 650 in about 4 months. And people were coming in with needs outside of what we could facilitate: education, employment, housing, legal, finance, you name it. What we now call, I guess, the social determinants of health. And I just had this huge Excel sheet trying to connect people to services. But kind of going back to the original question of, you know, there's a million reasons you can say no to start a business. I don't have capital. I've never done it before. I don't have a strong network. I don't have this. I don't have that. I think the driving force for any entrepreneur is that you're going to figure it out. And that's part of it. You have to be resourceful. I think everybody on the panel here has a strong academic background, has networks that they can leverage, but those networks are only as good as the ones that you create, and having the kind of the courage to kind of take that first step. And if you kind of have a mindset of, oh, I can't do this because of X, you're kind of already behind. It has to be all in. If you have 1 foot in, 1 foot out, you'll ultimately probably exit and go do something else. And so from our perspective, you know, it's don't allow yourself to make excuses, regardless of what your challenges are from an entrepreneurial perspective. Just do it.
Can I add something to that? This just brings to mind something I recently learned in a course I was taking. Somebody said that you need to, when you're building a business, especially when you're starting, you need to focus on the who, not the how. And that pertains to roadblocks. So for me personally, like I said earlier, I have my own consulting business. Part of that involves like a sales funnel, lead generation, website, you know, pricing, all of these things that I haven't done before. And I find myself, when I find myself not accomplishing something that I set out to do, it's usually because there's a roadblock. And a lot of times the roadblock is because, not because I don't want to work hard, I can't make the time, it's because I don't know how to do something. So I just don't do it, or I delay it, or I drag it out. And so this course just mentioned that tagline. It's not the focus on the who, not the how, so find the people that can help you do those things. And there's a limit to that, obviously, if you're just starting a business and you don't have the resources to hire someone to do a website, but maybe you can find an intern or someone that just came out of a coding school that needs, you know, experience. There's other ways besides, you know, hiring a full-time expensive employee. Maybe it's a friend who's done it before, or it's a lower cost resource, or it's just teaching yourself something. But that was like a mental switch for me, because I said no to a lot of things in terms of like my task list, and that was preventing me from moving forward. But that's another way that I look at getting around all the reasons I can tell myself why I can't do something.
Hey Mark, you know, you see so many businesses in your world. You know, it's super intimidating to start a business. There's a million reasons to say no. What are the reasons you say yes to lend capital, provide capital to these businesses, these veteran-owned businesses?
Yeah, I mean, veterans are sort of uniquely qualified to start and run businesses. And there's also some lessons for non-veterans as well. Like, I think there's things that the social enterprise community that is not comprised of veterans can learn from the veteran community, right? And the answer is basically that veterans are extremely gritty. They're very used to working in diverse teams, right? If you come out of ROTC or Service Academy, you know, as a Army infantry officer, you're going to be given a team of 30 people at the age of 22. And those 30 people come from every cross-section in society. Every race, every color, every creed, every background, every socioeconomic level. And you are their leader. That is an amazing experience, right? So you are learning about leadership and dealing with diversity and how to bring together a diverse team toward a common goal better than, in my view, any other training program in the country. I don't know any other group beyond veterans that takes a diverse team like that, unifies them behind a common goal, and then under the most stressful conditions imaginable, deals with very complex problems. I mean, that right there is a training bed for the best entrepreneurs in the world. There's a reason why some of the most successful companies in the world are started by veterans, right? Nike, FedEx, on and on, right? It's because that experience is unique, and I think there's things that even non-veterans or folks who aren't in that space can learn and replicate from the way that veterans approach entrepreneurship.
That's really good, Mark. Katie, we were talking earlier about, kind of this ecosystem around veterans, creating this network, getting out there talking with people. This is something you've lived through and talked about how important it is. Can you maybe talk through that a little bit, kind of how important this ecosystem is to veterans entrepreneurship?
Sure. I would equate it to, there's lots of affinity groups, like being a Columbia grad is one, where you went to undergrad is another, where you're from, where you live. This is just another niche that has been extremely helpful to me, so I can give a few examples. The MEBA group, the Military and Business Association here at Columbia, gave me a toehold when I came to business school. I came off a deployment in June, moved here in July. It was like, orientation, I was like, what's this? Why am I putting duct tape on my face and singing a song with my classmates? But it kind of gave me a toehold to help me transition, so that was like kind of the first example of it. As people I had a common shared background, and like Mark was saying, you have this shared amazing experience, which wasn't always easy, but it's a commonality that you share. And when you go into the workforce, whether you're starting your own business or working wherever, knowing that you can reach out to those people and they're going to respond to you, it's amazing. If somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn and they were a vet, 95 times out of 100 I will respond, regardless of what it is, unless someone's rude or it's a form letter or something. So having that access to people who are in different industries, different stages of their career is so fantastic. And there's someone named, his name is Justin. He started a podcast called Beyond the Uniform. I don't know if anyone here has ever heard of it, but I did an interview with him like maybe 3 years ago, and even to this day, he found out that I was starting this veteran collective, and he sends me folks. I get probably one intro a month, and I get on the phone with them. These are people I've never met before, who are starting a business, super early stage, which is something I've experienced with. I talked to someone last week who's starting a company around nutrition for people who struggle with diabetes. Never met this guy. We didn't overlap in peer groups in the military, but solely because we're both veterans, I got on the phone with him. We had a great conversation for an hour, and I was able to help him. So there's this sense of responsibility you feel to respond and help other people who have this shared common background. And I think that is a huge asset for people who are starting businesses. Like I was saying earlier, you run into roadblocks and you don't know how to solve a certain problem. If you reach out to someone, obviously with respect and respecting for someone's time and being clear about what you're asking for, they will respond to you. So, and then as I've started this veteran-owned collective community, I've just seen the way that people can come together, and part of the mission is to give people a place to interact. So the kinds of interactions I'm talking about that have happened to me organically, create a place for that to happen, because not everybody went to business school or has a network here in New York City, so create a place for them to have those organic interactions.
That's awesome. And Taylor, you co-founded your business with another veteran. How did you guys meet? How did you connect? How did that happen?
A little bit of fate. So when I was applying to Columbia Business School, they link up veteran military applicants with current veteran military students. I was randomly paired with my co-founder. I was living the problem in Philly and trying to solve it. He was writing a paper in one of his operations classes about the fragmentation of resources in the veteran military community. About 5 minutes into our conversation talking about the admin process, we realized this shared goal. He's like, "What are you up to?" And I was just like, "Well, I'm doing this, but I'm really trying to focus on solving this problem." We ended up talking for 5 hours. Met 2 days later, spoke for 5 more hours. This was summer of 2012. He did a deployment to Afghanistan for 6 months. We talked every day because he was in the Air Force, and you guys get that luxury. And then he came back December of 2012, and we said, "You know what, screw it. Let's go build this thing." And we've kind of been tied to the hip ever since. And I think kind of going off of what Katie was saying is, the veteran and military community is already pretty much a tight-knit group. I think we all had shared experiences, but as we've seen it in other groups as well, entrepreneurs are also the same way. Majority of them, not all. Just like not all veterans are good people. But I think it's leveraging that network and kind of putting yourself out there, and being vulnerable probably will be your biggest strength, because you can overcome problems. If you're scared of making mistakes, if you're scared of reaching out to someone, then you're probably too scared to be an entrepreneur, because that's the name of the game.
And Mark, you know, one of the things we had talked about last night as we were preparing for this is, you know, we want to make this kind of practical in terms of operationalizing this, right, and empowering people with ideas for how to start businesses. So as you look across this landscape, you know, what resources are out there to start one of these businesses, to really just branch out, to get over that hump of, you know, a million reasons to say no? What are you seeing in the vets landscape right now?
If you are a veteran or a military spouse, there's a whole sort of network of support resources for you as an entrepreneur. It's really quite amazing. I always say that if veterans treated veteran status like an alumni association, which we don't generally, right? I know some folks are trying to sort of fix that, right? But if we treated being a veteran like being a graduate of veteran school, right? Military school, we would be the largest, most powerful alumni association in the world by a large margin. In terms of numbers, companies started, total revenue, people employed, all the metrics that matter, I think we would be more powerful than even, say, the Columbia, the Harvard Business School, alumni association, right? If we actually treated veterans like an alumni association. And to Katie's point, that's what folks do a little bit, right? If they reach out to you, you take a call with them solely because they're a vet. Taylor does the same thing, as do I. So there's a lot of resources out there that are just focused on veteran entrepreneurs. A few big ones. IVMF is the Institute for Veterans and Military Families at Syracuse. Great academic work, white papers on sort of what's happening to the veteran space and their families. The Bunker Network of Labs. This is basically an incubator network. Todd, their founder, would kill me for not knowing the exact number, but I think they're north of 22, 23 different incubators in different cities right now. Think We Work for Veterans, and actually they have a partnership with We Work right now. Patriot Boot Camp. This is a group that has been training veterans to become tech entrepreneurs, specifically through a series of I think they have 2 or 3 big events each year. And then my own foundation, StreetShares Foundation, is probably your big 4 in terms of volume and impact metrics. IVMF has probably trained 30,000 veterans to become entrepreneurs, and that's a real impact that they're having that matters. So there's a preset sort of network out there, and then to Katie's point, there's an informal one where if you're a veteran and you need to make a contact in a business and you reach out to that company and you find the veteran there, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be your entree into that business. So there's a whole kind of a burgeoning, kind of a groundswell, frankly, of this veterans entrepreneurship movement that's very exciting.
I will say something that's interesting to me is that I think we all know of these organizations, and the folks that I talk to they're starting like different kinds of businesses, like as opposed to like a venture capital eligible business that's going to have a large exit or something. They're a power washing company in San Antonio. It's just a different type of business. And it's interesting to me that a lot of these folks still don't know what the major resources are, and some of that's, you need to get out there and do the research, but you don't leave the military with an understanding of what's really out there. You have to go look for it. And I think that's something that I think we could do a much better job there, but that's been surprising to me to learn. Yeah,
that is a really, really good point. I think veterans leave the military with certain inherent intrinsic advantages to becoming an entrepreneur, but extrinsically they're actually disadvantaged. Because while we were all overseas doing whatever we were doing, our competitor on Main Street was at the Chamber of Commerce. Our competitor on Main Street was hanging out with bankers and lawyers and investors and accountants and all the folks that you need to make your business win. And so you enter that space usually a little bit older, a little bit behind in terms of your network, but intrinsically you've got some unique characteristics that, if properly harnessed, can turn that veteran into a great entrepreneur.
So it might be a good opportunity to just pause for a second. Any questions amongst the group for the panel at this point?
Question. So I'm not an expert, but apparently I've heard that there's a very large homeless population within the veteran community. I have some assumptions, but what do you think is the reason for that? Like, where's the gap in terms of getting those folks engaged, and like why
I'm certainly not an expert, but I did stop. I mean, you see people on the street, and again, like the LinkedIn thing, if I see somebody with a sign that says veteran, sometimes I stop and talk to them, and I say, like, what happened? Like, have you tried to go to the VA or, you know, some of the other resources I know about? And one person told me once that he did go to those organizations, but what they could provide him with wasn't enough to get him off the street. So there is help, but it wasn't the exact type and amount that he needed. So maybe they give him food or job training, for example, but there's no money for rent. Those kinds of things. So that's kind of only comment I can give.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of right in my wheelhouse. This is what we deal with when we first started. So social terms of health, homelessness, and housing is a big issue. Housing across all of our networks is maybe the top issue for all populations. Homelessness is interesting because people arrive at that and from different angles. I think a lot of it can start with policy of how you even define someone as homeless. You know, so in New York City, as an example, in most cities, you're not considered homeless until you are actually on the street. You could be bouncing around from apartment to apartment or couch to couch or living in your car, but you're not considered homeless. So there's like this big backlog of people that are about to be homeless, and we're only trying to address those that are actually on the street. Then you run into behavioral health issues. Then you run into, could be substance use, could be a bunch of other characteristics. And I think around social determinants of health and really kind of what we're focused on is not looking at people in kind of like silo of this one area, they're homeless, let's just solve that. People's needs and experiences and things are dynamic. And you have to look at them holistically across a host of different categories to then try to pinpoint what got them to that area. Because there's people all along the spectrum. Those that just kind of had a hard go at it, but they're still hard charging if you just give them kind of a step up. And then others that either just want to be off the grid completely. They don't want to be at a shelter. They don't want to be in the system. They don't want to be known. And those are just different challenges. So I think we're trying to look at it from a holistic perspective. And within social determinants of health, human and social services, we are in a legacy sector. You know, they're literally in the 20th century. They're pen and paper, Excel sheets. If you walk into your primary care doc and there's a wall full of brochures, that's not how we do things today, but that's how people look at human and social services. So what we're trying to do is, it's a piece of the puzzle, it's not the overall solution, but it's providing digital infrastructure so we can at least track and start to see where are these people showing up, are they going into organizations and just not getting services, and they get frustrated and they're, okay, I'm just on my own now. We're trying to just pull data to really identify what are those root causes and can we address them.
Do veterans over-index in the homeless population? Do you know?
I think they're a high percentage. I don't know about the over-indexing, but it's a high percentage.
You know, I'm not smart on this issue by any means, but one of the things that Katie said really stuck out to me is you know, engaging and talking with these people. You know, because to me it all boils down to this civil-military dialogue. You know, a lot of times when I went through business school, and even today, a lot of people just kind of say thank you for your service and don't really ask any questions. They're either intimidated, they don't know what to ask, or whatever. We love to talk about this stuff, and I think we should talk about this stuff. You know, the nation has effectively been at war, a state of war, for 18 years, continuously, since 9/11. And the performance of those Americans, you know, your citizens, your fellow citizens overseas has just been incredible. Talk with them. It's going to help you humanize the problem. It's going to help them talk about these things. I think it's going to increase, you know, the knowledge and the sharing amongst the general public. So that really stuck out to me in terms of talking with these people, really challenging these people. Because one of the things that I've noticed is you go from one day being a high performer in the military, being challenged to be a high performer, being challenged to be a warrior, and then you transition, and there's kind of this void there. There's a little bit of a void. It can be a difficult transition for some people. For others, it's really not. But it's different, you know. And I think one of the things that would be helpful is just ask what you think is a dumb question. There's no dumb question. You know, just ask these questions of a veteran. Let's talk about these things. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? You know, any other questions?
Hello? So I'm in the process of starting on my proof of concept, and I'm looking for a prototype lab that I can build. I mean, it's a tech product. So I've looked around, and at Columbia there's a few, but they're school specific, like the School of Architecture or something like that. So it's not open to everyone. So I was wondering if you guys know of anything in New York City where you can build the most basic proof of concepts.
What's the product, if you don't mind my asking?
Yeah, so I am building VR experiences for veterans that are transitioning out of the military and want to see what the world's like before they actually go into it.
There's something in Brooklyn that was started.
It's through
Innovation
NYU.
Lab or
yeah,
something?
I think it's the Veteran Innovation Lab.
I contacted them, and I don't know, maybe funding got cut or something, but they canceled their
Oh,
veteran program for this year, and they said we'll give you updates on the next one.
are you a veteran?
Yeah,
You are, okay.
I'm actually, I did 8 years on active duty, and now I'm a reservist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bunker Labs is one that comes to mind, but they're not going to help you build a tech product.
I was thinking maybe I need to crowdfund or have a Kickstarter to
All right,
build
so
a
I can
prototype.
help on this. Well, actually, you go first.
No, there's a very good resource for this in Washington, D.C., if you don't mind a short train ride. But let's talk afterwards. There's a client of ours that we've worked with who does exactly this. He has like a maker's movement type lab where you can build anything using, woodworking, metal, 3D printers, plastics, whatever. It can all be done in one space. So let's talk afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
I think the other thing that I would add to that is going back to being resourceful. Try to think outside the box. Are there VR companies here that you can go do some sort of internship with that, you want to build a product and they'll take a chance on you? When we started Unite Us, it was very tech intensive. We raised $2 million on 12 pieces of paper, zero tech. The thing about entrepreneurship are there are no rules. If you put yourself in a box, you're going to constrain yourself. There's a million ways to get things done, and our path is not the norm. So I don't want to say that anybody can go do it, but it's all around a little bit of the hustle and kind of figuring out what are my other options. Because if you just go into kind of a school academic setting, that's one thing. But if you're really looking to build something and scale it, who are those people that you would want to partner with anyway? And reach out to them. They might take a shot.
Thank you.
Good luck. I think it's a great idea. I hope it works. It's awesome. Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Hannah. I work here at CVS in the admissions office, and we definitely want to, continue to grow our community of veterans here. We definitely want to continue to grow membership in MEBA. So, thinking back to those days when you were starting the business school application process and all that, if we're talking to a population of veterans or soon-to-be veterans, and they think maybe I do want to be an entrepreneur someday, but they're not so set on the idea of business school. What are some of, the biggest, questions or things that you think we should be showing this population to say, hey, this is a great next step. This is going to really help set you up to be successful when you are ready to, start your venture? That's a very broad question. I apologize, but.
I think that's an awesome question. Taylor, you want to take it first?
Yeah, I would start off with not overselling it. I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, there's a whole kind of culture that you don't need school. And I think it comes back to leaving the decision up to them. I think the beauty of Columbia Business School is the network. You get a general master's in business. You're not going to be an expert in anything per se. But I think highlighting the resources that you have here, highlighting the alumni and others that have done this work that they can have access to, because I think that's one of the big things that people are scared of, that they're going to go and be all alone. If you come in here, you have a network that you can at least reach out to. Now, will those people reach back out to you? Who knows? But you have access to them. And so I think it's playing it cool in the sense of not like you come here, you're going to be a great entrepreneur, but saying we understand the landscape of entrepreneurship. We just think we add a resource to your toolbox that's going to help you be successful, and then let them make the decision.
Every study tells us that veterans need 3 things to be good entrepreneurs that they don't currently have, right? They need funding, startup funding. They need a better network, and they need coaching/mentoring. I mean, every study will tell you that out of IBM at Syracuse or others. Just as my foundation tries to hit all 3 of those things, if you, in your pitch about the business school, emphasize, hey, veterans need these 3 things, you can get all 3 of these things at Columbia. I think that's a pretty compelling pitch.
I would also add just showing people what's possible, and my personal experience was I had no idea what kinds of jobs were out there. I was in ROTC, I put my head down, I did my work, and I was in this ecosystem, and I wasn't like, oh, maybe I'll run operations at a food startup. That was not even on my radar. And so I came to business school in large part because I didn't know what to do next. And then while I was here, I kind of was like, oh, what's consulting? What's banking? Ran away from that. What's startups? What's, all these other things. And so what I took away from the business school experience, aside from the network, is just what was possible. And I think MEBA actually did some of these like lunch panels where they would bring in vets who are in different industries. Just tell us what you do. What does your day look like? What kinds of things do you work on? And that was really helpful.
Yeah, just thinking back on my own experience, I think that's such a critical point, connecting people with others so they can start to conceptualize what it means to be an entrepreneur, right? Because when I started business school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, right? And I was a little bit older. I just got back from my last appointment in May. We started in August, and I'm sitting here across from, a 24, 25-year-old, and they're like, I'm going to be an
investment. With duct tape on your face, doing a dance at orientation?
Exactly, yeah. And they're like, I'm going to be an investment banker. And I've wanted to be an investment banker since I was 7. And I'm like, what is that again? What exactly is that? And so you almost feel behind. And then you get wrapped up into this on-campus recruiting thing, and it's like a thundering herd of companies. And you just get wrapped up in that. And it's almost like entrepreneurship becomes something on the side, right? But I think if you can start to conceptualize that early and know what it looks like, I think veterans are natural entrepreneurs. You think about what we've done up until the point where we transition to something like business school. We're sent to these random, austere places with a bunch of different tools, and you're just basically told to figure it out. And again, this goes back to the civil-military dialogue. It's never as clear-cut as showing up somewhere with here's a clearly defined mission, here's what you're doing every day. It changes constantly, and you just have to figure it out. And so I think if you can start to introduce that, maybe introduce them to some other vets, or even not vets, somebody who's going to challenge them and say, you might want to look at this. I think that might be pretty powerful.
That's actually very interesting because the way you describe the business school is very similar to my experience coming just from the nonprofit or public sector in general. So it sounds like there could be some bridges, even business school, where people that are coming from different areas and the military, come together more. To your point, sort of the civil-military dialogue. If there's more of that at business school, at Columbia University, and in general, I think it sounds like it could be pretty beneficial. Just a comment, not really a question.
Well, Gwen, I think it's a great point. You think about what Mark said earlier, right? Doing well and doing good. And this is something we talked about as a panel, and it might be good to just toss this out to the group. A lot of times, we come from a very mission-oriented organization, right? That's what the military does. It has a series of core values, right, and a very mission-oriented focus. That's different from a for-profit initiative, right? So I guess how do you kind of blend those two, or how do you think about that as you're doing entrepreneurship to continue to do good?
mean, from my perspective, I mean, we're a for-profit organization, but we're a social enterprise. We're very tech-heavy, and our biggest thing initially was we need to recruit just badass developers, and it's hard to do that in a nonprofit space where you're continually trying to raise funds and do certain things. So we wanted to build something that was sustainable, that we didn't have to rely on grants or goodwill or things of that nature. I think it's very easy to do well by doing good. I think it's a decision that you have to make. And I think even in general social enterprises, we were kind of talking about this earlier, of whatever your solution is, focused on the people that you're actually trying to impact, rather than kind of fitting it into a big institution or a program or something like that, because that's how things kind of fizzle out. And really focus on the people that you're trying to serve and get their feedback. You know, the first product Unite Us built sucked. It was horrible. Because we thought that the fragmented resources, if we put all these resources on a pretty map and we just gave that up-to-date resource directory to veterans and their families, they were going to be able to figure out all their problems. What we didn't realize is like there's eligibility requirements associated to those. There's different funding timelines and all this other stuff. And so the beauty of the veteran and military community is they don't let you blow smoke. And so they told us it sucked. And so within 3 months of starting our business, we flipped the model and said, okay, what are we actually trying to do? We want to prove, did people receive the services that they're looking for? I think as you start to build your solution, and even on the VR side, it's like focus on the people that are actually going to use it, and does it solve a problem that they have? And if so, can you do that for 10 people? Can you do it for 100 people? I mean, Unite Us started with, Lucky got involved with the Institute for Veterans and Military Families on an initiative they called America Serves. They were trying to build a technology platform. We had built it, and so we partnered. We built one network, then we built 11. Then we started to see that social determinants of health was a big buzz term. Veterans weren't unique, expanded it to all populations. So now we deal with Medicaid, Medicare, opioid, behavioral health, and now we have a presence in 30 states. It's $45 million, but we started slow. It's a slow burn. It's a marathon, but it's focusing on, can I solve a problem for somebody? And if so, you have a sustainable business. And so we just took the path of, let's not rely on anybody else for grants. Obviously, we still went after the VC side of the house, but we wanted to build a sustainable business and recruit talent for that.
So wrestling with this do good, do well thing has been my life's mission. I mean, I've been doing this for a while. Actually, when I was here at Columbia, my sort of final thesis I wrote on exactly this thing, like new legal structures that would empower this, like you know, B Corps and that kind of thing. It's a spectrum, right? So on one side you've got, you know, pure you know, philanthropy. On the other, you know, pure unadulterated capitalism, right? And all of us are trying to find some space in the middle and where we're comfortable. And there's different levels and different labels for all these different things. When we started in my basement in 2014 is when we launched. We had a team of 7 in my basement that worked for a little while until we got our first bit of funding, got our first office. We were very, very clear about what our mission was. And our mission was to get as much capital into the hands of veteran entrepreneurs as possible. That was our goal. And that was a very unifying thing around my team, right? Because they all knew they were there for something more than being a part of a startup, something more than coding, something more than making some money. So it was sort of in our DNA from the beginning. It was a part of our selection process. If you were crazy enough to join us in my basement, in part you were doing so because you too believed in that mission. As we've grown, though, we've gone through a few different phases. So for example, the latest instance of my company, so version 3.0 of StreetShares, is the StreetShares platform, where now we're taking the lending technology that we use for veterans, and we're working with banks and giving that to them. So now we're helping community banks basically, keep up with the JP Morgans of the world on the tech side by giving them tech to make small business loans. Necessarily, that pulls us out of the veteran market exclusively. And so we literally had a team meeting about this with, now my 50 employees. I first did it with my quarter of my employees who are veterans and said, hey team, we're looking at a strategic pivot. This pivot is going to take us out of focusing just on veterans. How do you feel about that? Is that okay? And actually, as a founder, I was asking, frankly, permission to do this because I knew that many of them joined the company because of our mission. And universally, they said yes, because we'll have more reach and more impact on veterans if we can get our tech into the hands of the banks and let them do it too, right, basically. And so I got their permission. And then I went to the 2/3, 3/4 of my employees who aren't veterans and said, okay guys, many of you came here for the mission. I want to pivot it a little bit. Is that okay? And they all gave me that permission. So it was this sort of like dialogue, frankly, over the past 5 years, this balancing of mission and profit. But the bottom line is you can do more good if you're doing well financially. Actually went to a Nation Swell event a couple years ago. Howard Schultz was there. And he was asked, hey Howard, you like do all this kind of stuff with your baristas, they write on coffee cups, let's talk about race and all this kind of stuff. Why do you think that you can do that kind of social stuff? And his answer was very simple. He said, because I've created an insanely profitable business. And so my stakeholders let me do that because I've handled the money side of things, right? So my belief is it's a spectrum. Everyone has their own sort of comfort level on the spectrum. But I think it's the most sustainable way to do something is if you can do it while turning a profit. I've been a judge at sort of multiple pitch competitions in the social entrepreneurship space. And nearly every single pitch that I get is a nonprofit that has some product or service, right? And the answer is always the same. It's, can you make money doing this thing? Yes. Then do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because if you make money doing this thing, you can now sustain the good that you're doing and not have to pass the hat and fundraise every year, right? So it's a spectrum, and all of us have to decide where we land on that spectrum. I'm probably right in the middle, or like 2/3 toward the sort of do good side, right? That's a very, very important thing to me. But I recognize that you got to make money to do good.
So I think we're out of time. But I did want to thank our panelists, Katie, Taylor, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us. That was a fascinating discussion. Thank you, everybody, for engaging us with questions. I did want to have one last shameless plug because I'm still in uniform. And we talk a lot about entrepreneurship and innovation. Bring your ideas to the Department of Defense. We want them. We need them. And I'll just give you a quick example. So Dr. Will Roper, who's the head of acquisition for the Air Force, did an event earlier this year in New York, actually, in his room just like this, and a bunch of startups came and pitched, and literally within minutes of hearing a good idea that resonated with the Air Force and resonated with the Department of Defense, they were cutting checks, literally swiping a credit card to provide funding. We need your ideas. We need your innovation. So don't forget about the Department of Defense. It can be big and intimidating sometimes, but we want those ideas. We need those ideas. But thank you so much for coming out. We had a blast. And again, thank you for giving us the privilege to serve this great country. Thank you.